And I learned how to read a blueprint. And so every evening the kids would come in and we would build this concession stand. And it was wonderful. We built the concession stand and had beautiful colors on it. Then we ran into a real problem. We could not get out the door of the courtyard because we hadn't figured that out. How are we going to get this thing out of this courtyard? So I went back and got the architect to tell us how can we take this thing apart, get out the door where we wanted to go to. So we created the first demountable concession stand, modular stand. Yeah, that's what we did. But we taught the kids. I taught the kids business techniques about, so we're talking about youth entrepreneurship when it wasn't being called that. It was just expediency that I was trying to find jobs for young people. And I had a woman on my staff whose father worked for a confectionery company, and so we went to them and they gave us all the free candy. So we had free candy, free ice, free shavers, and we were making money. And I was teaching the kids how to save their money and invest it. And so we got so entrepreneurial that we had it in a location that, if you knew Washington right now, it was right by the government printing office, which is on North Capitol, and we were right on North Capitol on I Street. And every day at 4 o'clock, there would be thousands of workers who would pour out of that government printing office and the government post office down the street, and we couldn't shave the ice fast enough to eat snow cones. But we got enterprising, and the kids said, well, we can make more money if we can sell hot dogs and hamburgers. I said, that's a great idea. So we got a barbecue, put it outside, and started cooking hamburgers and hot dogs and snow cones, and we got shut down by the public health department. So you can't do that. You can't serve food without a license. But these are young people. I don't care. But through that experience, today, of those 8 young people that I had doing that, 3 of them own their own businesses in DC. And it came, I think, as a result of just the exposure and experience, and we were talking about innovation. And so it was an exciting time. We could find little monies here and there. We could go to the poverty program and find a little money. And people were in a spirit of support, but in a spirit of trying to help, engage people. So we went through this process, and we have urban renewal, we have model cities, we have neighborhood development programs, and all this stuff is evolving. At the same time, you have other federal agencies that are doing other things. The beginning of the small business development movement started during this period of time, when the SBA was created to provide financing for starting up and supporting small businesses around the country. You had the Office of Economic Development assistance out of the Department of Commerce. They were creating minority business development programs. So you have, and it really was interesting because this was during a Republican administration, but there was some really exciting stuff that was happening around small business development that was occurring at the same time. So here we now, in communities, are now finding resources that can begin to drive small business opportunities in these areas that we're talking about. We're real focused on really housing and those kinds of infrastructure pieces. They're now trying to build the mechanics to see how we can be holistic. Now, the other thing that happened in talking about innovation was that in realizing that our families needed services and access to services, we had this huge building that I said had been an old convent. So I started going around to the other district departments saying, Department of Health, you can put a clinic in our building. The Department of Welfare, you can put an office in our building. The Department of Labor, you can put, so we created all these programs operating out of this big building. And it really was the beginning what became these little mini city hall concepts of how you can aggregate services together in one location that makes it accessible. Now, we weren't calling them mini city halls or one-stop shops. We just simply were providing services to residents. We had a public health clinic in the building, had all these services. We did taxing for the people in tax season, we did their taxes for them. So this is a service that we were just providing to residents. We also had a huge commercial kitchen in this building. And across the street from where we were was a Catholic church that provided food to the homeless. Just provided sandwiches. And so Monsignor came to me and said, "Boy, would you mind if we started using that kitchen? You're not using it for anything." I said, "Oh, help yourself." So we started the first program of serving hot meals to homeless people, and all of a sudden the numbers we were serving was like 35, 50. And we started serving hot food. That line was out the door, but we were able to do it. And there was a woman who was brought in from a professor to figure how we could put a program definition around what we were doing. And we created a program called So Others Might Eat, SOME. And so some is right now the largest homeless program in District of Columbia. It provides shelter, it provides feeding, it provides, so all those innovations came out of this little experience, you see what I'm saying? Where we were simply being expedient, trying to look at how do you provide services to people. And we weren't coining them and defining them, but all of a sudden here we are and doing things like mini city halls and doing micro enterprise business development and doing all these things. And I think that was what I was seeing happening around the country. The people were just looking at themselves and finding solutions that would work to improve the quality of life for people who they were dealing with. And we weren't trying to find a program or find a definition, we were just doing work. And that was the exciting part about it that I found the most exciting.
Here in New Orleans, you mentioned like Johnny Jackson, Sherman Copeland, Sidney Barthélemy. They all came out of something like this in terms of community centers and Desire and other areas that had these multiple services and trying to do youth programming, rat abatement, various kinds of things that they developed as youngsters and became, you know,
Came to life, yeah.
Congressmen, not congressmen, but state legislators, etc.
Exactly. And it is this spirit that was going on here that is what's missing, I think, today out of communities. Because where there was a requirement under these programs that required massive amounts of community involvement and participation, that began to wane as new programs became into existence. The biggest shift that began to occur after this period of time occurred was in 1974. And 1974 was the beginning of the Community Development Block Grant. CDBG. Now, what was this program? This was the first time the government was articulating that we're going to provide, instead of these categorical programs, see, all these programs were called categorical programs. And if you look in the digest for, I can't know names well, but for all federal programs, it will list all these categorical programs you can apply for, have different windows when you apply. But here is a concept of block grant. It says we're going to, through a formula, we're going to allocate funding to distressed communities in cities where the city applies. And it's no longer going to be this competitive thing where you go in with these discretionary funding. We're going to cut a lot of it out and we're going to go to block grants. And so not only was this was the case for housing and community development, in the other agencies of government you were starting to see the same thing. The coming together of block grants. And what did it do? It was a way for the federal government to really begin to reduce the amount of dollars they was making available to communities for housing and community development work. Because, and this grant in 74, it had a phased down program. I'll give you an example. In the District of Columbia in 1974, the amount of money the District of Columbia received under this formula was $48 million. Okay, what represented all the money they had been receiving for urban renewal, for model cities, for water and sewer, for 7 categorical programs that they had been receiving money from on a competitive basis, they now went in and got it as a formula. And so they had this whole harmless period for 5 years, which says that we recognize that you all have been operating at this level for whatever period of time, and so we're going to recognize that and we're going to reduce the money over a 5-year period of time down to the level where the city's entitlement under the block grant was $28 million. So you can see that that was half, less than half of what they had been getting. So now, 5 years later, the money has gone from 48 million down to 22. Now at the same time, the problems are not going down in proportion with the resources. If anything, the problems are going up like this and the money's going down. But this was a way that money now is distributed to communities through this community development block grant or some other formula allocation. The Department of Labor, the money that goes to communities for the Department of Labor for unemployment goes to the formula allocation. The money that goes to communities for welfare assistance goes to the formula allocation. You see what I'm saying? So this was a way to begin to reduce this amount of dollars. This was a significant period of time. And there was a requirement, and interesting, in my career, I put together the District of Columbia's very first community development block grant application. I did all the community participation and involvement and planning, put together the application, got it approved through the legislative process in the city.